All right. So I'm really excited about today. I have somebody joining me who is just a wealth of knowledge about Osawatomie, about this town, about the history. Um, I was pointed in the direction of this person because through a coworker. Um, I am just really, really excited. I've never had a conversation with this person before, so uh, I sent the invite. Looking forward to hearing from Doug Walker. Um, from what I've gathered, now I didn't have enough time to do a whole lot of research, but Doug has a master's in history, which I think is really cool. He has been a state senator. He owns and lives in the Mills House, which is one of the eight places that's registered on the National and Kansas State Historical Society. So I'm really excited to talk to him. I'm excited to kind of get his perspective of this town. Obviously, he calls this home. This is his place. This is, just as much his as everybody else's here, but he's just like pretty ingrained in the community, and I'm excited to meet him and talk to him and see what he has to offer. This is going to be really neat. There's eight places that are on a registry, either the National Registry or the Kansas State Historical Society Registry. There's the Mills House, which we're going to talk to Doug here in a minute about, the Old Stone Church, the Creamery Bridge, which I don't know about the Creamery Bridge. That one I'm not sure about. Unless it's the 8th Street Bridge, then neat. The Asylum Bridge, the first land office. Let me focus. There we are. Okay. The Soldiers Monument and John Brown Memorial Park, and also the term Jayhawker, Jayhawk, that was coined here by a guy named Pat Devlin. All right, so joining me now we have Doug Walker. Can't hear me yet. There he is. Doug, can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. You sound great. Are you
Good.
are you in your office at the Mills House?
I am.
Oh, that's amazing. So I've done very little research on you and this and this town. On the just the city website, it talks about some of the historical places, the Mills House being one of them. And what I've read about the house itself, it was built by a guy who started an oil company and was the first one to put an oil rig west of the Mississippi. Is that right?
Not exactly.
Okay.
It's sort of right. I've got a whole hour presentation just on William Mills,
Oh,
that we could
wow.
do that.
Yeah.
But the long and short of it is he was about 11 years old when they drilled the very first oil well in Titusville, Pennsylvania. And he
Okay.
lived in Pennsylvania in the town next to where it was drilled. So he grew up in the oil industry. Um, Back then, the primary uses for oil was for a lubricant. They didn't have internal combustion engines.
Right.
So it didn't take long before there was an oil glut. And so the price dropped out. He lost his job. He didn't have any money. So he came out west to seek his fortune.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, Kansas was out west.
Yeah.
And so his primary business was gas. He came to drill for gas. And so in his lifetime, he drilled over 400 gas wells
Okay.
in the area. But since he was a famous driller, the city of Neodesha contacted him and wanted him to go down to Neodesha to find gas for the city
Yeah.
because all the city lights were gas and things like that. So he goes down there and drills, and he strikes oil.
Oh, wow.
And so this was the story gets a lot longer than that, but basically he drilled the first commercial oil well west of the Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the first oil well drilled west of the Mississippi was at Wea in close to Paola.
Really?
Yeah, but
Wow.
that was not a commercial well. It didn't produce much, but it was, you could consider it the first well, but it wasn't the first commercial well.
That's interesting because Texas gets all the credit for it.
Well, okay, here's what's interesting. When Mills drilled that well down there, what he did, he capped the well. He was drilling for gas.
Right.
So he capped the well, took samples, and told the people in town, I did not find any gas. And then he left town. He went back to Pennsylvania. He still had contacts there, tried to get people to finance him in opening up this oil field. He drilled 2 wells down there in Neodesha, both struck oil. So he couldn't get anybody to finance him, but he got 2 wildcatters, Guffey and Gailey, out of Pennsylvania, to go in partnership with him. So they came down and looked at it. They were ready to develop the field, and Mills had 1/4 interest in it, but he couldn't come up with his funds to develop the field, his 1/4 interest. So he sold it back to him for a little over $4,000. And that was the opening of the Mid-Continent oil field,
Okay.
which is Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you know, short of a few funds, he could have been very, very wealthy.
Right. Right. That obviously that house that you're in, that you live in, it's kind of a unique deal. My wife and I drove past it we've lived here 7 years. Been here 7 years. We drove past it for the first time like 2 days ago. And so
you don't get out much.
no, we just don't go down that street. I mean, I get out, but so learning about this town. So I've made it a goal to learn about this town, to learn about the people here, the character of this town, and so seeing that on the website and seeing that as part of the history, I had to go find this house because goodness gracious, the statistics of it alone are really fascinating, right? It just it was built by a very unique builder. It was it's 7,000 square feet or something like that. Has 9 fireplaces and 15 room. Like, goodness gracious, it's the largest residential home in the county. And it's on the is it the National or is it the Kansas Historical Society?
The National Register.
It's
the largest private. I think there's a couple of more that are larger than it now.
Okay.
But for a long time it was the largest, and it's the only private home in the county that's on the National Register.
Right. And that's a pretty unique deal. My wife and I had not an argument, but we just sat in all this morning going, yeah, you can live in a National Registered building, I guess.
You can.
Yeah, and you are living proof of that, sir.
That's
so
right.
Were you born in Osawatomie?
No, we moved here in 1980.
1980. And was that was after you graduated high school?
Oh yeah. I graduated in high school in 1970.
Okay.
And so I spent a lot of time in college.
Sure. Yeah, I noticed that you had a bachelor's degree and then you got a master's in history. Is that right?
Right.
And what was your focus in for history whenever you got your master's?
African American studies, Black history.
Okay.
And that's still what I read mostly, is Black history.
Wow, that's really fascinating. That's that you strike me as kind of like if the wind is blowing this direction, you're going to lean that way.
That's probably
you're going to face
pretty close.
You're going to face the other direction.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Because with those degrees, I taught in Osawatomie.
Yeah.
I taught school for 21 years, but I taught woodshop.
Right. Yeah. So this in this building, I'm at the high school.
Okay. Yeah.
And I learned this morning, that when Obama had his speech here in town, they used the wood shop as his home base. That was his staging areas.
Okay.
And I learned a whole lot about that trip.
That was long after I was gone from there. But yeah.
Right. I believe one of the Maddens was in there at that point.
Yeah.
One of the Madden brothers. So you taught here from 1980 until 2002, 2003?
No, I taught there from 1980 to 1988.
Okay.
And then I was in the Kansas Senate for 8 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then when I got out of the Senate, I did some odd jobs, construction, had a charcoal plant down in Chitopa. And then around 2000, I came back to Osawatomie for a couple of years.
Okay.
And then after that, I transitioned to Paola for 11 years.
Okay. Okay. So, well, how was your time in the Kansas Senate? How, I guess, the question I guess I really want to get after is what, what's your big takeaway from your 8 years in public office? As, you know, Kansas State Senator, what's your big takeaway? What kind of, I guess, what kind of lessons did you learn about humans, about character, about the way people interact?
Well, first of all, it's a lot different now than it was back then.
Sure.
I was in there from 90 from 88 to 96.
Okay.
And I can honestly say, with the exception of one or two, I genuinely liked all the people I served with, Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
I mean, we got along, we socialized together, we had disagreements on some policy, but our policy difference was nothing compared to what it is now.
Sure.
Um, Everybody seemed to be up there to promote the public good. Um, and, you know, as I observe now, there are a number of people that are up there just for pursuing ideological ends, regardless of how it affects their constituents.
Could you tell if somebody was there for personal gain versus you know, serving the public?
Um,
Or was that pretty well hidden under the table?
you know, the way they voted, they usually voted. There were liberals and conservatives, and they would vote that way. But usually they tried to serve their constituents,
Yeah.
and just everyone just has a different take on what that means.
Sure.
But but yeah, it was, like I said, you've got people now in the legislature. I would say our local legislators in particular, who really aren't answerable to the public, who a lot of times won't attend public meetings, they won't answer your questions, and they go up and vote the way they want.
Hmm.
And regardless of what their constituents are telling them at breakfast, or, you know, they're in the bubble. They're in their
Sure.
own little bubble. They're not out in the community.
So would you go to like Whistle Stop or something to go meet with local local constituents and
We had
hear the
legislative
public?
breakfast every Saturday. During my district, covered about 6 counties.
Oh wow, okay.
So in my first term, I represented Fort Scott, I represented Iola, and every place in between there.
Oh wow, okay.
And so we'd go to legislative breakfast, and you'd just visit with constituents and ask questions and stuff.
That I think is probably the part that I would enjoy the most, is just meeting people and hearing
Yeah.
stories, which is again why I'm doing this, is because I'm just, I want to meet people and hear stories and you know, their experiences. So when you were teaching here in Osawatomie, 80 to 88, what's one memory that stands out to you that kind of describes this town?
I don't know if it describes this town. I started teaching in 88. And like I said, my degrees were in political science and history. I went back for 1 year to get a minor in industrial arts. And so when you do that, you learn wood shop and metals and, you know, different things.
Yeah.
So I was the wood shop teacher. So I will admit that I was a terrible teacher the first year.
Right.
I was not very good. And that was the year, you may have heard of the animal class. They were called the animals.
I have not heard of this class.
They were a terrible class. And
Oh,
they will
no.
admit now that they were a terrible class.
And this is the graduating class of 1980?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're the ones that broke me in. So in January of that year, I was going through the Kansas City Star looking for places to work.
Oh,
I was
sure.
looking for other employment.
Right.
And so it was terrible. So fortunately, the metal shop teacher next door was Walt Hayes, who he grew up here, born here, grew up here. His family grew up here, and he was kind of the guy that got me through it.
Okay.
And if it wasn't for Walt, I probably wouldn't have been teaching for 21 years.
Yeah.
So he was kind of the steady hand
You know, that
that
kind
got
of
me through.
that reminds me, my next door neighbor, she just left. Her name's Nancy Tooley. She was here for 21
Yeah.
years. And she was She was like the magic eraser. She would erase all the mistakes that I would make. She took care of so much. And you know, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Sadly, she's no longer with us, and but she's left a legacy. And when you think of somebody who's been here for 20, 21 years, not just at the school, but in the community, that is a considerable amount of time. I mean,
Yeah.
you're looking at almost a quarter of a century, and that's a considerable amount of time, and you can leave you a pretty big imprint. So knowing that somebody was there for you to kind of I don't know, to kind of hold you up, right? You know, to
Yeah.
kind of prop you up and tell you that this is going to be okay. We're going to get
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you had somebody, and I had a similar experience that you had with that. That's fantastic. So you taught here for 8 years. You went to the Senate, and then after that, you went and had a bunch of you, as you said, I guess different jobs. What brought you back to Osawatomie?
Well, I never left.
Okay.
So all that time, I've always lived here.
Okay, so this has been home since 19.
Yeah. I've been here for 43 years.
Oh wow, okay, great.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So at what point did you decide that the Mills house was a place you wanted to spruce up, so to speak?
We moved here in 1980
Right.
and we bought the house in 83.
Oh, so you've been in that house for 40 years.
40 years. Yeah. We've been in it longer than anyone.
Oh, yeah, so that means okay.
So, but there's quite a history there. When we
Right.
bought it with two other couples.
Okay.
There were three families in it, and everyone was teachers, was a teacher in the system except for my wife, who was a nurse. All the other five of us were teachers. And the plan at the time was to make a bed and breakfast. I mean, what else can you do with a house this big, right?
Yeah.
And
And
that was,
it had apartments in it, right?
yeah, it had apartments.
Okay.
And so when we bought it, it had been neglected for a number of years. It had been apartments. That was historically, that's the way people made it work. They cut it up into apartments. Lenny Mills, in her old age, she let campers and trailers be out in the yard. They paid, to do that. But it had holes in the floor. The plaster was falling off. The plumbing was bad. It had no central heat or air. I mean, in fact, we bought it at a sheriff's sale.
Oh wow.
And so the bank ended up buying it. And then we ended up buying it from the bank for $28,000.
Good gravy.
And the most frequent question we got after we bought it was, why would you do that?
I mean, leave it to a historian to try and to try and save a piece of history, right?
Well, this kind of fit both of my hobbies, the history background in the house, and then my woodworking skills to do that. So it kind of meshed all of my talents together.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And so it worked.
So
when we went to fix it up, one couple got a divorce, so they sold it to the other two. And so then we went to get a loan. No bank would loan two couples money on a house they didn't live in.
Right.
So we ended up buying the other couple out. And so, like I said, we moved in 88, but we've owned it since 83.
Wow. That is so neat. That there's the thing that struck me whenever I passed by the house the first time was there's a set of windows that are curved.
Yes.
And in my mind, my dog has recently put her nose through a window, and I thought that's got to be a nightmare to fix if somebody like broke that window. And I don't want to invite bad karma to you in any way, shape, or form. But have you ever had to replace one of those like curved windows?
Yes. At all? Yes.
How did that work?
What I did while I was teaching, every summer I would hire a high school kid. I was a wood shop teacher because I kind of knew who the ones that would work.
Yeah.
To work on the house.
Yeah.
And one year, a kid ran a scaffold board through one of those windows.
Oh no!
And so there was a place in Kansas City that did it. And so what they do, you take the frame up there, they create a steel mold, and then they melt a piece of glass over that mold.
Yeah.
So this was back in the 80s. In the 80s, that glass was like $385.
Oh my gosh.
I would hate to think what it would be today.
I would just tag a zero on the end.
Yeah. But in 2016, we got a Heritage Trust Fund grant,
Oh,
and we
good.
got storm windows for the house.
Yeah.
And each one of those storm windows was over $1,000.
Wow.
So
Wow. And
without the grant, we couldn't have done it.
yeah, with a house that has 15 rooms, I bet there's 70 something windows.
No, there are 94.
94.
Yeah. There's all kinds of trivia I could get about the house.
No, and that's it. This is why we're here. Like this is exactly why I want to talk to you. So you are a stone's throw from the Asylum Bridge and the Mer d'Azine.
Yes.
From what I read, and again, I've read maybe 5 sentences total about the Mills home, but it said that that the house was constant. I don't say constantly. It was flooded quite a bit until the dikes were built. What year were the dikes built?
Let me go back and give you a little more history on the house.
Please.
Okay. So the house was built in 1902.
Okay.
Okay, that's the period of William Mills' life, about the only period of about 10 years in there where they had a lot of money.
Okay.
Because as he got older with gas wells, you have to keep drilling them or they peter out. So he couldn't do it earlier in life, and earlier in life he wasn't that successful.
Right.
So in 1902 they had money, so they bought a plan book, a George Barber plan book, and back at the time, famous architects would put these catalogs together that you could go through and thumb through and pick out the house you wanted.
Right.
And so that's what they did.
Almost like a Sears Roebuck of sorts.
Yeah, except an upscale Sears and Roebucks.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So that's what they did. And so this is a George Barber plan book house. We have the original plan book that Lenny Mills used to pick the house out.
Wow.
And since that time, Dover Publications has republished that plan book, and this house is on the cover.
Wow. So that's cool.
It is pretty cool. So one Christmas, the girls all got plan books for the house.
Yeah. So how many children do you have?
We have 3 daughters.
3 daughters. That's fantastic. Yeah. What about grandkids?
4 sons, grandsons.
Oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just turned 40. My wife and I have 2 kids.
Okay.
We were late to the party when it comes to having children. So my son's in 2nd grade and my daughter yesterday got accepted to pre-K. So I'm real excited for her.
You are late to the party.
Yeah, I'm a 40-year-old overweight, out of shape guy trying to chase around 2 young kids with more energy than it. And I tell my students jokingly, I want to make sure that you understand, jokingly, I tell my kids to go ahead and have babies while you're young, because chasing them around at 40 is so tough.
That's right. Well, wait till you're 70 and have grandkids to chase around.
Right. Yeah,
and I've discovered the boys are a lot different than the girls.
Yeah,
a lot different.
That's true. My dad watched the kids last summer, and he when he was handing my children back to me, he goes, you're raising your daughter is really simple. And I go, oh, really? That's not what my case has been for me. He goes, yeah, just give her 100% of your attention 100% of the time. And
that's exactly what it takes.
Yeah. But
there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. For my son.
Because I've always said, when we were growing up, when the kids were growing up, we didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
We were teachers. But then when I was in the Senate, and most people don't realize this, that was when we had less income than we ever had.
Wow.
The Senate does not pay anything, regardless of what people think.
Right.
And so, but what it did do, teaching did do, it allowed me to spend the time in the summers with the kids.
Yeah.
And so I got to spend a lot more time with my kids than most people do. And we did it. And we enjoyed the kids at home immensely. And I was very sad when the last one went to college.
Yeah. We are experiencing those summers right now. Every day is a new activity, trying to get them out and doing stuff. And yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. I love it.
So our kids were involved in sports, and
Mhm.
a couple of them were pretty good. So we spent a lot of time traveling and
Oh, it's
going to
fantastic.
sports events.
That is fantastic. So, what kind of I'm thinking about,
Let
raising.
me back up
Yo, yes,
one more
please.
time. Let
Yeah,
me go
please.
back to the house flood. Let me go back to the
Yes.
house. Like I
Oh,
said,
yeah,
I've got all
that's
this
right.
stuff on the house.
Yes, that's
Talk
right.
about the house flooding.
Yes, please.
Prior to the 70, I think it was 1970 when they built the levees, the house would
Okay.
flood frequently.
Right.
So they had a plan. What they would do is as the flood waters came, they would raise all the windows on the first floor.
Okay.
That way the water would come in, it wouldn't bust the windows. The
Oh,
water would come in and then it would go up. So the state hospital was obviously the main employer in town.
sure.
And at that time, the only way to get to work was over the First Street Bridge.
Yeah.
So they would take rowboats wherever the water was. They would get people in a rowboat and they would take them to work and back. So I've had two people independently at different times tell me that they rowed boats through the front round windows of the house, through the house, and out the dining room window in a rowboat.
Really? Oh my goodness.
So I wouldn't have necessarily believed it if it hadn't come from two independent sources
Right.
that they did that.
No, that sounds crazy that somebody would row a boat through your through your
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
But
But we've got watermarks 7 feet up on the first floor walls.
wow. And like no amount of paint primer is going to cover it, is it?
No, but the difference is today it would just destroy it.
Right.
But the walls were lath and plaster with no insulation.
Okay.
So as the water would go down, it would dry out.
Okay.
Right now, in our houses now, the insulation would hold the water and just cause it to mold and rot.
Oh, that
But
makes
back
sense.
then, it would dry out.
So okay. So it was I wouldn't say built for it, but
As
it
much as it could be. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Wow,
It
that's
still did damage. We've had to replace all of the floors on the first floor.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and it had a lot of termite damage
Sure.
throughout. So repaired a lot of that. But
And you did all the work yourself.
yeah, when we first bought it, I hired, we started in the kitchen. I hired somebody to finish the sheetrock. And I watched him do it. And then I got the bill and I said, I can do this.
Yeah.
So so I went and bought the tools, and now I'm pretty good at finishing sheetrock.
Yeah, there
So
you go.
I've learned a lot of stuff. And the amazing part is we've been here 40 years. So I'm having to redo some stuff that we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And I look back now and says, crap, did I do that? My skill level was not near as good 30 years ago as it is now.
Right. Oh, of course.
So
I mean, as with anything, you get better with practice, but
you do.
I just love that you get to combine your passions in your living room. Like you don't have to go very far to
No.
to enjoy your passion. So when was your wife was always on board with this, or at some point your wife go, now this is a little bit more than we can chew?
She didn't have much choice. She was okay with it.
Okay.
She's very patient as far as the construction goes. She's
Oh,
very
that's
patient
good.
in that regard.
Yeah.
There's probably been of the 15 rooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them have been the front room at various times.
Well,
Because what happens is you move to a part and you work on another part.
right.
So when that part gets done, you can move into that part. And then, so we've got family photos of the Christmas tree in various rooms around the house as we worked on different parts.
Yeah. Oh, that was the 92 Christmas.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And another funny thing, we have one room we call the orange room.
Okay.
The family knows which as the orange room because when we moved in, it was bright orange.
Oh, wow.
It's green now, but it's still the orange room.
Right. Sure.
So we're the only ones that know it's the orange room, but everybody else, it's just a bedroom.
Okay.
So we've got all kinds of stuff like that. But the girls grew up here.
Now, since your house, it's a private residence, right? So
Yes.
this is your home. Like this
Yes.
is for all
Right.
intents and purposes, this is your home. But being on the National Registry, I'm sure you get some. Do you ever get like interesting piece of mail from like random places throughout that say things like, "Hey, we'd like to come tour your home and take pictures."
Well, we have frequently that happens.
Yeah,
Um, Usually, at least once a week, someone stops outside to look at the house.
sure.
And when we first moved in, we had to keep the doors locked. People would just come and they'd walk in thinking it's a museum or something and want to
Right.
tour the house.
Well, yeah. It seems
So
like
we'd wake up and people would be walking around in the yard. So, so
not public property. Not public
yeah.
property.
But now that we've been here 40 years, people know now. And
Right.
so that doesn't happen near as frequently as it does. But
Right.
people still stop to take pictures, and we do give tours once in a while.
Oh, that's
Um,
excellent.
I like giving tours. My wife doesn't, so usually tours happen when she's gone.
Sure, sure. So she has a women's retreat in mid-August, so we're gonna set
Yeah.
up.
And it's like I tell them, if people knock on the door and I say, okay, I can give you a tour, but you got to realize we live here. It's not in tour condition.
Sure. Well,
There's going to be stuff laying around, just
yeah.
like if someone dropped in on your house unexpected,
Oh my
it
gosh.
wouldn't be cleaned up,
Oh,
it wouldn't be. So this
yeah.
is what you get.
I have a 7 and a 3-year-old, so I could
Yeah.
and a puppy. I have a puppy dog who chews everything. So my living room more resembles what you'd see after a tornado, not something somebody would want to tour. So
Well,
yeah,
one of the reasons I like to give tours is because it kind of reminds us that this house is pretty special.
yeah.
When you live in it for 40 years, it's just the house. It's
Right.
just where you live.
Right.
But people come in and they remind you, oh, the ceilings are, oh, those are pretty cool. Look at the woodwork. I mean,
Mhm.
and so then you kind of review okay, these doors came from France. This is original wallpaper, and so it kind of, okay, yeah, it is pretty special when you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's 121 years old,
Yep.
doing something right.
Yep.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I live at 10th and Pacific, and the history of our house, we had a principal that lived in our house at one point in time.
Okay.
And nobody really bothers too much to tour my 2-bedroom, zero fireplace. Yeah, so how much do you pay a chimney sweep? Because you got 9 chimneys to get through there.
Well, it was all gas. The guy was a gas man, so there
Oh
were
yeah,
5
that's
gas
right.
wells on the property.
Yeah, that's right.
So everything in the house was gas. The lights were gas. The chimney, the fireplaces were all gas. And to supplement that, there was a coal-fired furnace, a big coal furnace in the basement.
Okay.
And there's ductwork going to every room from the basement.
Okay.
And so it was just gravity flow that heat that thing up, and the heat would just flow out through the house.
Yeah.
So we have had the chimneys rebuilt twice.
Okay.
The first time we did it, we when we first got it, we subscribed to all of the back issues. We ordered all of the back issues of Old House Journal.
Okay.
Tell us how to do that stuff. And one of the things they said is a lot of times the brick that they used back then was soft. So you can't use modern mortar because it will spalt the brick. It will flake it off.
Oh, okay.
So we had the mason add lime to the mortar to soften it up. Well, he'd never done it before, and he added way too much lime, and the mortar was too soft.
No.
So after 20 years, it washed out.
Yeah. It kind of.
So we had to do that. Was part of our Heritage Trust Fund grant, is to get the chimneys re-tuck pointed.
Yeah.
But now the house is in pretty good shape.
Yeah. It's so cool. I think that's absolutely fascinating. So you've been in Osawatomie for 43 years.
Yep.
What is it about this town that keeps you here?
The house.
The house?
The house does it.
What about the people of this town? Are there any characters in this town, people here that you've made connections with that
we have a lot of friends here, but we bought a house in Burlington now. We own a second house in Burlington.
Oh, okay.
And that's where the grandkids are.
Right.
And so what keeps us here, we have a lot of entanglements.
Sure.
We have the RV park.
Yeah, across the street.
Yep, we own the RV park. I've got a house that my mom lived in that we own, that we rent. And then I've got the cabinet shop uptown. So
where's the cabinet shop?
It's Classic Wood. It's on the south side of town, in about the middle of the block, a little bit more towards the east end.
Off 6th Street?
No, off of Main Street.
Off
It's
Main
on
Street.
Main
Oh,
Street. Yeah,
oh,
it's in that Main Street block.
oh, okay. Well, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So the deal is from that, one of the reasons I went to teach woodwork, I like to do woodworking. And I
Yeah,
thought, man, I'll never be able to afford a shop that has all this equipment and to do the stuff I want to do. So I thought, man, if I teach school, I can build all kinds of neat stuff.
right.
Well, the problem is, and I believe this to be true, if you're teaching and you're doing it right, you don't have time to work on any of your own stuff. If you're working on your own stuff, you're not doing it right, you know.
Yeah.
So that didn't work out. But so when I retired from teaching in 2010. We
Okay.
bought the building uptown, and I started a cabinet shop.
Yeah.
And so that cabinet shop has more equipment than any wood shop I ever taught in.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so I can do anything I want. And now that I've retired from the cabinet shop, I rent it out. But the deal is, here's the shop. I'm renting it to you for this amount of money, but I always have the right to come in and work on anything I want.
Yeah.
And he's okay with that.
That's, I mean,
So
I would be too, because you get somebody to collaborate with too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I've
Somebody
got
to
the
run.
wood shop of my dreams, and he pays me to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you're doing it right.
Yeah,
You know,
can't get better than that.
it kind of reminds me of you saying, like, you know, if you were you know, doing your projects as a teacher, you wouldn't be a very good teacher. And if you're a really good teacher, then you're not doing your own projects. And that reminds me, as a math teacher, you know, I talked to several mathematicians, and I'm kind of in the world of mathematicians, and professors of mathematics loathe teaching because they want to do it right. They want to do it well. And they know if they're going to teach and be good at teaching, their research is going to suffer. The work that they want to do is going to suffer. So it's kind of an interesting parallel, even in woodshop, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, mathematics and upper level mathematics and woodshop, you wouldn't imagine there being too many parallels, but they really are. It's pretty interesting.
Well, what I discovered when I went to open up the cabinet shop and I got into business doing that, how little I knew.
Really?
Because really, when you teach high school wood shop, your skill level doesn't get much above high school wood shop.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It really doesn't. You're just there.
Right.
So once I got out and to do the cabinet shop, we did some really neat stuff, but there was a good learning curve to be that advanced, to get to the advanced level.
Right. Right.
So
that is really, that's fascinating. Oh man. So I'm trying to think, out of all the things that I've kind of gone through, you know, learning about the house and learning about you know, your bit of history. I just want to go back to your time in the Senate real quick and briefly, because I had this question that rolling around in the back of my mind. I've never talked to a state senator. I've never talked to a U.S. senator. I guess I'm kind of wanting to know, were you ever approached by some nefarious people trying to get you to do or vote a certain way? And
no, let me get my tea. Just a minute. Let me get my glass of tea.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I had it at the other table.
Were you
no,
ever, yeah, were you ever
never was. But
Okay.
here's how it works. There are more lobbyists in Topeka than there are legislators.
Sure.
And here's an interesting thing. When I ran for the Senate the first time, I was teaching full time.
Yeah.
And I'd gone to the superintendent. Superintendent was Swede Swenson at the time, and told him I wanted to.
Any relation to the Swenson Elementary?
Yes, that's the same Swede. Yes, same Swede.
Okay.
Yeah, same Swenson. And I was running at the time when I filed against the president of the Senate, the Republican president of the Senate.
Oh wow.
And
so long odds.
long odds. So he said, okay, sure, you can run, no problem. And if you win, we'll work something out. Right. And in his mind, he was saying, okay, this guy doesn't have a chance. You know, when he gets this out of his system, he'll be back and he'll be teaching school.
Right.
Okay. So when I won, Swede had retired. We had a new superintendent come in. So I won on Tuesday, was when the election was, and I won. On Thursday, the new superintendent sent me a letter saying, we want your resignation by next Tuesday because obviously you can't be a teacher and be in the Senate at the same time.
Right.
Like, whoa, what? There are a number of teachers in the legislature that keep their jobs
Right.
and do that. So I thought, they pay their dues to the Kansas Association of School Board and school administrators to hire lobbyists to go up and talk to legislators. You could have one on your staff,
Right.
and
Right.
you're going to fire him.
Yeah. Well, ask to resign. In all fairness, ask.
Well, if you don't, but it was worded, if you don't resign, we will terminate you.
Sure.
So anyway, that all went about. So the day I won, but when I ran, like I said, nobody gave me much a chance.
Yeah.
I didn't have a chance. So the day after I won, my phone was ringing off the hook.
Sure.
It was lobbyists in Topeka wanting to get to know me, wanting to know my views on things. The day before, I was just a know nothing woodshop teacher.
Yeah.
The day after, I'm a state senator.
Right.
So they all wanted to be my friends.
Yeah, you have the power of that vote.
Yeah.
That counts.
So 8 years later, when I lost, I had a small debt, less than $200. And I'd raised like $52,000 in the last campaign.
Yeah.
The one that I lost. So I had about a $500 debt, and I called up some of my friends who were lobbyists.
Yeah.
Several of them wouldn't answer the phone, and nobody gave me any money.
No way.
Which it just set in. You don't realize it. They're just using you.
Yeah.
They are not your friends. Oh. They are using you.
Yeah.
And as soon as you are no longer of worth to them, you are nothing again.
Right.
Right. And so that was very eye-opening. Very eye-opening.
Yeah, I don't remember who I heard this from, or it's a quote, I think, that says it's from a mathematician. It might be Dr. Nash, who did the Nash's equilibrium and game theory, said that people only make decisions based on their own self-interests, and they only act out of their own self-interest. And I kind of believe that, but that doesn't explain why people do really good work in this world, and why people have a tendency to help out other people.
Well, I can give you several examples where that's not the case.
Yeah, please do.
Well, it's like, why I'm going to get into politics.
Well, we don't need to go too far into it.
Because I don't understand why people vote for legislators who are diametrically opposed to those persons' best interest.
Right.
I don't understand that. For example, Obamacare.
Right.
A lot of people hated Obamacare. They despised it. They voted against it. They voted for people that voted against it. Now, many of those same people are on Obamacare.
Yeah.
And I know some.
Sure.
And they will never admit that it's a good thing, but they wouldn't have health insurance without it.
Right.
I don't understand that. Why don't you say, okay, yeah, it's a good thing. I'm glad they passed it. I was wrong. But it didn't happen. But anyway.
It's a fascinating world that we live in, that's for sure. Trying to figure out some of those questions, I almost say is a fool's errand, but
yeah,
it can get exhausting. So come back to your time at Osawatomie High School. You started in 1980. Did you have either of the Madden brothers as students?
No, I didn't. Okay,
because I know Rodney is still teaching here.
Yeah,
coworker of mine, coached here for quite some time. Yep. The head coach. I know he went off and played at KU, played football there. I didn't know if were you here whenever he graduated?
I think he graduated. I don't know what year he graduated.
I think it was 80.
Was it?
It might have been 80.
If it was he didn't take woodshop.
Okay.
That first year, if you didn't take woodshop, I didn't know you.
Okay, that makes sense. The other question I have is, do you have any interesting Carl Engel stories that you could share?
Oh gosh.
because he was your coworker and mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've only been here 4 years. So
and when I got there, I thought he'd been there forever. You
right,
know.
right. He taught.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
he preyed on first year teachers
Well, what in what way?
to take the Washington D.C. trip.
Oh,
And so I was a victim my first year. I
to go to
took
DC.
yes, I went to Washington D.C. on that trip.
You had to ride a bus because that man will not fly.
Nope, had to ride a bus, and you had the inside seat because
That's
he had the outside seat.
oh gosh, that's amazing.
So yeah, that's that's it.
Yeah, my father-in-law graduated from this school in 1975.
Ah,
And so just like real briefly about myself, I'm sure you're wildly interested. But my father-in-law, his dad and his mom and dad moved him here in the early 60s, maybe late 60s. And he graduated from Osawatomie in 75. Grandpa, his dad, was a blacksmith on the railroad and ran a crew as a welder on the railroad for 50 some odd years. Like the day he got back from Korea, he got hired and moved to Osawa and moved out. So
so what's his name?
Newcomb, Newcomb. Yeah. Grandpa Newcomb was undoubtedly the most quiet, introverted man. He after Grandma died, he was here for 4 or 5 years after Grandma died, and he went out socially one time. He went out to the Silver Sneakers one time, and he didn't care for socializing at all. So his socializing was kept to his son.
Yeah.
That was it. But my father-in-law, Stan Newcomb, graduated in 75, and when Grandpa died, Grandpa died the day my son was born. In fact, an hour before my son was born, Grandpa passed away.
Wow.
It incredibly fascinating situation. And it was really strange because it happened the week after Christmas. My son was born on December 29th. And I remember Christmas Day thinking, this is going to be amazing that we're going to have a photo of 4 generations, kind of up, we're going to have a 4-generation photo. And I'm really excited to have that. And then, finding out Grandpa passed. Well, we took Grandpa's house, right there on 10th and Pacific. We took Grandpa's house. And we've been working on it pretty steadily since. But I am not a woodworker, so I don't know how to do any of those things that you do. I can barely change the O-rings on the bathtub. So when it comes to leaky faucets and stuff, we're not great.
You just buy a new one.
Right. which is kind of crazy. But I was telling you that because a lot of these the Carl Engel was my father-in-law's teacher. In 1974, Carl Engel taught him how to write a paper and how to do that. Well, my first day here in 2019, on my first day, I talked to Carl and he started asking me a couple little questions, what's your connection to all this, And I said, well, my father-in-law is Stan Newcomb. And he goes, oh, Stan Newcomb, huh? And I remember him, and I remember, told me a couple stories about him. And I thought, Carl, you've been here for 54 years. You have been teaching in the same building. Well, the same. I think
it was the same building. Yeah.
At the same school for 54 years. How on earth do you remember? I don't remember kids from last year. And that was 2 months ago. So I was absolutely floored. Carl's an interesting character.
He is. And I have that problem. I taught at 2 different schools, Paola and Osawatomie.
Right.
So I see kids all the time that'll talk to me. I can't remember which school they were from. And here's another weird part is I've taught the kids of the kids I taught.
Oh, yeah.
So I decided to get out before the grandkids came. And it's amazing how much a lot of times the kids, when you see the second generation kids, look just like their parents did when they were that age.
Right, right.
So we had a couple of twins that I taught at Osawatomie, and then their kids went to Pale, and they look just exactly alike.
Oh, that's
Just,
hysterical. Hey, I don't know. We might still have an opening for a shop teacher.
yeah, I know. There's lots of them open
Well, I mean, just
around.
here in Osawa, I mean, it's
I
a
know. I'm not interested.
short commute.
Yeah.
And I could be your coworker, so you got that going for you.
I that it has what I would like to do is I'd like to, when you get a teacher, if they're available, if they're willing, come in for a couple of days and just work beside the kids in the shop.
Right.
I like doing that. When I taught in Paola, I had a guy that would come in once a week and he'd just mill around the shop and help kids as they needed. And I'd like to do that. That'd be kind of fun.
Well, I'll pass that along to the next guy.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before COVID, I used to read to the kindergartners. I love that. That was good.
Yeah, my mom used to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really good at that.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Did you do
What I thought was
the voices
really
of the
cool
characters?
is I did it for 2 or 3 months,
Yeah.
and it got so that they expected it. And here I am, this guy that just walks in for like 20 minutes a day to read, and I would get hugs all the time.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, that's how the kindergartners showed their appreciation. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great.
So as a teacher, last question, just because I find it fascinating, and this is a hard lesson for me to learn. Last question, and I'll let you get back to your day. But as a teacher, at what point did you figure out that your self-value was not wrapped up into what your students thought about you? Because I put when I first started teaching, I would get really, I would get very, I don't say upset, but I wanted every student to like me, and I wanted every student to be motivated, and it really hurt whenever a kid didn't want to, or and I teach math, so automatically people hate my guts just because of the subject matter. But
I understand.
But like, it was a hard lesson to learn. But at one point, I finally just said, like, my self-worth is not wrapped up in the opinion of 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
At what point did you learn that lesson?
I think it was early. It was early because the more you try to be friends with them, then they try to take advantage of
you. Yeah, that's a good point.
And so, because once they're your friends, they think they can get by with more.
Sure.
And so I don't know at the exact point, but it was pretty early on that I decided. And one thing, I had the animal class.
Yeah.
That I could not stand them. I didn't want them to be friends. I did not like them. And I will honestly say that I was not a very good teacher until, well, I was an okay teacher, but I wasn't the best teacher that I was until my own kids graduated.
Okay.
Because I spent a lot of time with my kids.
Right.
They were my focus.
Right.
And then when they got gone, it shifted to the kids at school.
Right.
And so I was a much better teacher. Well, I had that break. I taught for 8 years. I was out for 10 and then came back.
Right.
For another 12 years. And I was a much better teacher when I went back than I was when I started.
Well, and you also gained a lot of perspective.
Yep. And I think one of the reasons I was unprepared for teaching when I started, I'd been out for 10 years. How much can things change in 10 years? They change a lot.
A whole lot.
It's just, and so people talk about how kids are bad now. No, they're just different now. They're not any better or worse than we were. They're just different. And we're the ones that made them that way. So we just got to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I went back when I was 27 and I went back and got my bachelor's in mathematics at 27.
Yeah.
So I didn't start teaching until I was 31 or 32.
I was 28 when I started.
Okay. Yeah. So we are fairly similar, there was a gap from when I was in high school to when I started teaching. And kind of similar to you. And I have had that same, like, when I was in school, we didn't do that. You know, I
Yeah.
graduated high
Yeah.
school in 2001.
Yeah.
My first graduating class of teaching was in 2015 in JC Harmon in KCK.
Hmm.
But I just remember thinking like it's changed. Everything's changed. And
Yeah.
I honestly, I like after kind of hearing a little bit from you, that's probably the same every 15 years. Things change,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Because
it.
it had changed a lot. And that 10-year gap I had, it changed a lot from when I went back.
Yeah.
But my focus was better, was different. So it worked. So I will say I was a fairly decent teacher my last 10 years. And I
Yeah.
got out before I hated it.
That's good.
I know a
That's
lot of
good.
teachers that stick around too long.
Yeah. Carl Engel.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'm
You're
just
right.
kidding. That's
No, he
to
should have
each their
gotten
own.
out earlier. He should have gotten out earlier.
I mean, it's just fascinating that a man could go for 54 years. It's unbelievable.
I know it. I know it.
Well,
And it's, well, I won't say this on the podcast. We'll do that.
yeah. We'll let, at some point I'd like to meet up at Sonic for some cherry limeades or something. And
Well, better than that,
talk
just
about
come out and we'll sit out in the yard and talk. I'd like to visit you. You're fun to talk to.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Doug. That's awesome.
So,
Well, I really
yeah.
appreciate it.
And you can come and I'll give you a tour of the house.
Oh,
Bring your wife. You get a tour of the house.
that's fantastic. Yeah, we'll get a
So-
babysitter. I don't want my kids anywhere near that thing.
Well, I tell people, you know, when we were redoing it, it was never intended to be a museum. It's a house. We live
Right.
in it.
Yeah,
And that's what we want it to be.
it's a private residence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that you know, that's respected. At least from me, my perspective and my you know, knowing that it's a private residence. But when you hear something's on the National Historic Registry, you kind of go, well, that's public property. I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
It's not. It's definitely not.
But we've always had the attitude that we are just the temporary custodians of this property.
Yeah, but you've been at that property longer than anybody.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
But when we pass it on, we're going to leave it in better shape than when we found it.
No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
That house could not have been in better hands.
So, and I just won't sell it to anybody because we're getting to the point we've talked about selling it.
Oh, wow.
And if it wasn't for, because it's a lot of work
Yeah.
just to keep it up. So when we do, it'll be someone that we have confidence will take care of it and preserve it
Yeah.
and, you know, continue
That's
it.
cool. That's great. That's
So-
fantastic.
But yeah, I'd be happy to have you come down. Really. I mean
Awesome.
it.
Awesome. Well, we're going to keep in touch for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing some stories about the house and about your time in Osawatomie. I really appreciate it.
All right. It was fun.
All right. We'll talk to you
We'll see you.
later.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Doug.